Accessing.
When TV and radio collide.
Love it.
Wow. This is what you get. You're listening to JJ and Alex.
Don't touch that dial.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome back. JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Second hour of the program. Thanks for being with us. We're at the RV show here at the Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. So you can come down, get some great deals, shop, compare. That's what it's here for, right? Just come down and the big thing is, JJ, when people come in and they go, man, I'm looking for something. And these dealerships are like, look, we got some 24s. We have some 25s we want to get rid of. We have like two 24s. Please take them off our hands. They give you crazy deals, man. So come down, check it out, and drool over it just like we have been. Joining us on the program right now, RightsForNBA.com, of course, covering the Utah Jazz. Eric Spyropoulos joining us on the program. Eric, what's going on, man? And now Eric Spyropoulos going to join us on the program. Eric, you there with us?
Yeah, second time's the charm.
Hey, yeah, I was going to say, as soon as we get we're not there in studio. It's always hard because we're already doing this thing over the ether anyway. So,
yeah.
Hey, how about this win streak for the Utah Jazz? I'm sure it's what a great game to be watching last night. I was tuned in and I was going. JJ and I had a little bit of a friendly back and forth about where Triple J was going to hit with his home opener. I took the over on 26.5. He took the under smartly because, man, he had that underlying knee issue, and now the Utah Jazz have shut it down for the season. When did we find out about this, and what were kind of the full details of what they said about the Triple J injury?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that they had kind of discovered, I think, post-trade with a physical, and it's kind of this growth in and around his knee that essentially you have to address at a certain point. Otherwise, it can kind of build up and become really damaging. And obviously, he's just 26. I know he's been in the league for 8 years, which is kind of hard to believe, but still 26. You kind of want to obviously make sure that he can be super productive and healthy. And, they're going to have the procedure during the All-Star break and then kind of reevaluate from there and hope he makes the full recovery, obviously, in time to kind of lead into next season. But I don't think it's anything that's like super concerning at the moment, but something that they kind of discovered and realized that this would be a good time to address it for his long-term health.
Well, we did get to see him in a Jazz uniform for 3 games, one in front of a home crowd at the Delta Center, and I'm sure that was great for him to get that experience. What did we learn about the Jazz with Jaren Jackson Jr. in the lineup in those 3 games?
I think the biggest thing we learned is that there's a lot of potential on the defensive end. Obviously, this isn't even the full kind of group that I think Austin Ainge and the front office and coaching staff are envisioning for next year with someone like Walker Kessler coming back. And obviously Keontae George went down pretty early in that Orlando game with the sprained ankle. So we haven't seen the full team, but even with Jaren playing next to Lauri Markkanen, playing next to Yusuf Nurkic, guys like Cody Williams, Ace Bailey, even some of the other newcomers like a Vince Williams Jr., the Jazz have had probably 3 of their best defensive efforts of the entire season in those 3 games with Jaren. They basically just shut off the paint. They don't allow teams to score inside the paint with Jaren on the floor, and even without off the floor, they still have a lot of size. And on the offensive end, you see a guy who can not only kind of space the floor, kind of play within the flow of the offense, but he can get a bucket on his own, which I think the Jazz offense had kind of been missing over the past few years. And so when you add that element of a guy who can score in the post on a drive one-on-one situation, you add another wrinkle to a Jazz offense, which at times this year has already been really powerful. So we saw a lot of good glimpses, I think, even though it's obviously only been 3 games, but you're kind of projecting forward based on what we saw in these 3 games, and I think you have to feel really good about it.
We were kind of having these discussions over the last few days about, it's a bummer because you have all these names, all these guys who are making inroads, and obviously maybe just as big of the acquisition of Triple J was the presence of Keontae George and like the arrival of what he's become, which is not just a pretty darn good player, but people are talking about this guy going, man, if you redo that draft class, he's maybe the number 2 in that one, and you go, that's a win, for this group. But this trade doesn't look nearly as good and maybe even doesn't happen if you don't have that type of development. How much of a big deal has it been to be able to reimagine this team, not just from that defensive level, because it's been historically bad defensively, of course, over the past couple of years, but now that feeling of a reset does feel like it's more there. And how is the front office now dealing with all of that? I would imagine they'd be pretty excited about what the future looks like.
Yeah, I think you have to be feeling really good. Obviously, with it's all kind of. I think the jumping point last year is landing Ace Bailey in the draft, and a guy that people have been really high on, has a lot of talent, has fit in really well this season, I think, on both ends of the floor. And he even just got named to the Rising Stars game today as a injury replacement for Cooper Flagg. So the Jazz will be represented at All-Star Weekend. But Keontae's rise is, probably the story of the season because, like you said, I think it does give more confidence to the front office to go out and make a move for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. when you think you have that kind of perimeter lead ball handler, dynamic scoring guard locked down at a guy who could be, at an all-star level in the years to come for Keontae. And then obviously you've already got Lauri Markkanen. We had seen what Walker Kessler could do last year and even in the first few games of this season and how he had grown, Ace Bailey. And then you had a couple other, young flyers off the bench, Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, Cody Williams. And so all of a sudden you're looking at a team where you think you're going to have good depth. You think you got a few high-end pieces already. Now you can go and make a move for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. and bring him into the mix to kind of add to that defensive side of the ball. I think that all of those pieces, led by Keontae's rise, are what led to this move for Jaren Jackson Jr.
And there's just so much hope and excitement about this. And it's interesting in the last couple games because they weren't playing Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen in the third quarter, and a lot of people pan this that follow that follow the league. They're like, oh, they're not really serious. They just did that to tank, and they're not really serious about developing those young players. But the fact that they gave those young players a chance to play meaningful minutes in a game against a team as good as the Miami Heat and win that game and finish well. What does it say about the development of those young guys that were in at that time? Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, and Bryce Sensabaugh. These players are really coming into their own, and they're starting to benefit from the amount of minutes that they've been able to play because of this rebuild.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the organization's focus and dedication from overall sense on player development over the past few years. Obviously, last year, most of those guys got a lot of playing time and made a lot of strides. This year, they've been getting some more playing time, but they've also had some vets to kind of compete with in the locker room, including, to the two of the newcomers, Vince Williams Jr. and John Conchar from the Grizzlies. Will Hardy talked last night actually about how, the young players can learn from those vets, and then the young players can also help the vets kind of get comfortable in the Jazz system. These are prime fourth quarter opportunities, especially on the road too, in more of a difficult environment, to get against teams that are trying to compete for the playoffs. And down the road, when the Jazz are competing, they're going to want those young players to be ready for those moments because they expect to have a lot of games like that they're going to try and win to make the playoffs in the really tough Western Conference. And so sometimes you see small glimpses. Sometimes you see a guy like Isaiah Collier have 22 assists in a game and the next game scores career high in points. The flashes might be small, they might be big, but either way, they are growing opportunities for those young players.
Eric, you cover this team really closely, and it's always an awkward thing. Well, it's not something that we've had to deal with a ton in our market because this team has always been relatively successful, and any talk of tank and all that stuff, I try to remove yourself a little bit from how close you are with the team, just from an overall view. What's the reality on when the Jazz take this criticism on how they're handling it and that it's somehow so much worse than what other teams are doing to create a spot for themselves within the rules of how this thing has been set up? It just is a team that hasn't taken advantage of those rules like so many others have. It just seems like the Jazz are taking a heavier hit on this thing.
Yeah, it is an interesting – I think the discourse around tanking in general has been really interesting to kind of follow over the past few years. Obviously, I think, it really blew up with the 76ers in the process, which is actually a decade ago at this point, which seems hard to believe. But it kind of died down. They made reforms to the lottery odds and they added the play-in tournament, and they kind of was hoping that teams would compete for that. But it is interesting, I think, that the Jazz specifically are getting kind of the most attention in this when there have obviously been a lot of teams in the past that are, not playing guys after they trade for them, shutting them down, limiting their minutes, et cetera. I think there is kind of, when you make a trade, I think that also brings naturally a lot of attention to your team, especially when you trade for an all-star like Jaren Jackson Jr. And so I think a lot of attention did shift to the Jazz basically over the past week or so, with the expectation of like seeing Jaren Jackson in a Jazz uniform, how's it going to fit, all these things. But you mentioned the dynamics, you mentioned the rules. The team is trying to balance kind of getting synergy with new players, but also developing young talent at the same time, and then trying to envision their path to becoming a playoff team once again. And that also a key part of that is, adding another piece in the draft this year, which people say can be a really, good draft at the top.
Could be a historic draft as far as the talent goes, and I've heard some say as good as the 2003 draft. That we'll have to let time tell on that one, but it tells you, Eric, the level of talent that is in this draft is unquestionable. I mean, the depth is phenomenal. And last year was a good draft, too, and one of those guys in that draft, the Jazz got Ace Bailey at number 5, and it's been interesting to watch his development. He's getting a lot more minutes now that he's been healthy. He played 40 minutes against the Pacers, 40 against the Hawks, 37 against the Heat. What is he doing in those minutes? What are you seeing right now from Ace Bailey that should have Jazz fans really excited about his future?
I think the thing that should have Jazz fans most excited is actually not his scoring. I think that is such a natural part of his game and will just will just grow naturally in the Jazz system as he develops strength, gets more comfortable, adds weight in the offseason. All those things. I think his scoring is so natural from all three levels, and his buy-in to the Jazz system. I think it's really the defense and the playmaking that you're seeing, and included in that is kind of his rebounding, which can be on both ends of the floor. But, I mean, he has been, last night he has 4 assists, and it's not just, these simple, okay, I'm making the extra pass. It's I might be running a pick and roll with a guy like Yusuf Nurkic, or, finding Lauri Markkanen or Jaren Jackson off the screen. And he's willing to set screens. He's willing to rebound. He's willing to pass the ball. He's fitting into the system. So I think outside of his scoring, which I think everyone expected to see from him, it's the other parts of his game that have really kind of shown up, especially over the past month or so with this larger role. That, I think, is what should have Jazz fans most excited.
Jazz Blazers tonight, and it's going to be the last one here at home before the All-Star break, and I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves. For us, the Super Bowl is hit, football's over. Basketball now hits the break. Hockey is nowhere to be found currently. Eric, any
it's in
suggestions?
the Olympics.
I know, but it's not. Come on, man. Like, we got to get something. Everything's on a break right now.
We're starving. That's what you're saying. We're starving.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Eric, do you end up going on a break somewhere, too? Are you going to end up going somewhere cool?
I don't know if it's cool to me because I'm from New York City, but I'm going back home for a few days just to get away and kind of disassociate for a little bit of a break.
Yeah. You go over there and just start talking about, I can't believe the Jazz are tanking. Can you believe this?
This is egregious.
Just get to that level again. Kind of get back in the center of the basketball universe there in New York. Eric Spyropoulos, he writes for the NBA.com, of course, to the Utah Jazz, and gives us all these insights all the time. We appreciate it, man. Thanks for being with us, and enjoy the break.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Eric Spyropoulos, everybody.